Hello, my name is Bart, and I'm just starting what I think is going to be a series of videos for YouTube. I actually looked on YouTube and couldn't find this anywhere, and so decided if nobody else had done it, maybe I would go ahead and do it. What I was looking for, though, was somebody just studying the Book of Mormon and having some of their own insights into the Book of Mormon. My personal feeling is that you don't need a lot of commentaries. You don't need a lot of outside resources. I mean, I use a dictionary from time to time just to kind of dig into what a word means. But my feeling is that the real messages of the Book of Mormon are right inside the text, and that we don't need much more than that. And so my hope is to just kind of do almost a chapter by chapter. I'll make these, I don't know how long, but review as I go through and do my personal study through the Book of Mormon, and some of the insights that I kind of come across. And I'll tell you some of my philosophies and some of the things that I've learned about studying the scriptures while I'm doing it. The first one is I've kind of switched over to a PDF version of the scriptures. I like the paper. I mean, I use the online version. I use the Gospel Library app that the church has, and I have a paper set because of my other calling, but I have just really gotten where I really like having a PDF version. I use a couple of different PDF editors and save it in a Dropbox file so it's available to me wherever I want. I pick it up on my phone or wherever. But I just kind of like the tools. I like being able to mark up the actual page. I know we're kind of starting to lose that with the electronic versions, but I like marking up the page. So I think there's something kind of neat about seeing the written word and kind of thinking about it. So I've just randomly decided to start in the Book of Jacob. This is where our family is reading right now. And so I thought I'd just kick off and start reading the Book of Jacob. These are the words of his preaching to his brethren. We get this story of Korah later. Coriantumr, I can't remember his name. I'm no scholar, so I won't remember a lot of things concerning the people of Nephi. But behold, it came to pass that 5 years had passed away from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. It occurs to me at this point that Nephi is probably pretty old. We assume that he's probably in his 20s or 30s when this whole story starts, so he's got to be getting pretty up there. And he gives Jacob a commandment concerning the small plates upon which things are graven. And he gave me, Jacob, a commandment that I should write upon these plates a few of the things which I consider to be most precious. And that really kind of stood out to me as I go through this. That what we're going to get in the Book of Mormon and what these authors were instructed to do was just put down what's most important, what they considered most precious. By the way, when I sit down and read the scriptures, I always start with a blank page. I'm convinced that really what happens is the Lord has different things to teach me each time I go through it. And so if I've got my scriptures all marked up, then all I do is remember. I remember what I learned last time, which may not be really what the Lord wants to teach me this time. And so I always like to start off with a fresh page, which with electronics is very much available. So I also think it's really important to make notes, so I like the margins and things like that. And I'm going to add a note here that the Book of Mormon only contains things that are important. I've learned, I spent a little time as a seminary teacher early morning. I'm certainly no scholar in anything, but one of the things that we really teach the youth nowadays is to look for doctrines and principles throughout the scriptures. And we're really good at training the young people now but I'm 48 years old, and so when I was in seminary, I didn't teach any of that. The church hadn't perfected that teaching method when I went through early morning seminary, and so I really only learned it as an adult. And so looking for doctrines and principles is something that is a habit that I've had to develop. And so this is what we would consider a doctrine. And the difference is a doctrine is something that's just always true. And if you look for those things, you'll find them throughout the scriptures. This is just something that, no matter what, is always true. And then we look for principles that help us make decisions. And that's really what principles are designed for, to help us. And the most common one that we see in the scriptures is, if this, then this. Promises attached that if you'll do this, then the Lord will bless us this way. And so you see those throughout the scriptures. Jacob here is told to only touch lightly concerning the history of the people. That's why the Book of Mormon, quite frankly, is a terrible history book, because the authors were told not to spend time on it. And that they should use the other plates that I preserved and hand them down from generation. But if there's preaching that was sacred, revelation that was great, prophesying, that I should engrave those on those plates. And the reason he gave was for Christ's sake and for the sake of the people. So there's a real purpose, as I think about this, that Nephi and Jacob and many of the other authors had for writing this, is that they're doing it for their people. I wonder if we have the same the same dedication to future generations. I don't keep a very good journal. I have off and on over the years, but frankly I stink at it. And I think most of us, we don't really think much about the next generation and the next. But boy, these Book of Mormon prophets, they were invested in making sure that they kept things in place for their future generations. This is a fascinating word. Maybe I'll mark it a little bit differently. I actually have a background in journalism, and really what he's talking about here is headlines. If you think about it, even as you're looking at USA Today or something, catchy headlines. This is a summary. We're only going to get, even from a doctrinal standpoint, we're only going to get the kind of the highlights. We're only going to get the big part of what they're trying to teach, the stuff that they felt that was most important. And that's what's going to be in here. So even when it comes to doctrinal stuff, I don't know if it's always going to include the nitty-gritty and the fine detail. So, for because of faith and great anxiety, it truly been made manifest concerning our people what things would happen to them. I find it very ironic that all these early prophets knew that at some point the Nephites were going to be destroyed. And so the kind of faith it takes to still be vested, to still preach, to still do all those kind of things, boy, that takes a lot of dedication. We knew of Christ and His kingdom even beforehand. Therefore we labored diligently among our people. And this is a point where I start kind of getting fascinated by sometimes what words mean. And so I'll sometimes pull up a dictionary and look at the word diligently. What does that really mean? What does it mean when we say he worked diligently to do something? And so I'm pulling up a dictionary.com, and it says it's an adjective to constant effort to accomplish something. You know, how fascinating is that if you think about what that means from a gospel perspective? This is what it means. Attentive and persistent in doing something. Not just lackadaisical, not just on Sunday when I think about it. I might take a few minutes, but they labored diligently. They just worked and worked and worked. And then I think of some of these other terms here, you know, to persuade them to come into Christ. And I think about our current prophets and apostles. What do they do when they want us to do what's right? They teach. You know, when they want somebody to make a good choice, they teach. And what a good example that probably is for us as parents. And so, partake of the goodness of God that might enter into His rest, and then not enter in. Wherefore we would to God that we could persuade all men to not rebel against God. There's that wonderful idea of persuade. By the way, I get fascinated when I see the same word over and over again in the Scriptures. Twice here now, He has used the word persuade, and so I get kind of fascinated. What does persuade mean? To induce to believe or appeal to reason or understanding by advising or urging. You know, what a good definition that might be, to urge people to do what's right. suffer his cross and the shame of the world, and take him on to fulfill my commandment of my brother. Now Nephi began to be old, and so soon died. Therefore he anointed a man to be a king and a ruler over his people, according to the reigns of the kings, even after he'd advised them not to. Even after he told them that they really shouldn't have kings, he decides to go ahead and do it. So they honor him by giving him, by naming each of the kings after him. The people are all divided into different groups, but they're going to keep it all the same for simplicity's sake as we go through the record. Maybe that's enough. As I go through my scripture study, I've spent about 10 minutes with you today, and we haven't finished the whole chapter. We got what do we have here? By the way, I haven't even talked about some of the footnotes. The footnotes are wonderful. Matter of fact, I see one here that the dominant important items when we talk about this word, the heads and the headlines that we talked about. But I think there's tons and tons of wonderful doctrine as you go down into the footnotes too. Ironic, as they start to indulge in wicked practices and look for much gold and silver. So some of the same things that give us problems today are problems that the Nephites had. And where does Jacob go to do his work? He says, I went to the temple, having first obtained my errand from the Lord. And again, another word that really gets me fascinated, this idea of an errand. I look down at the footnotes to see maybe if there's a interesting part of that. But an errand is a calling from God, perhaps. And I check my little dictionary, and it says a purpose. What a good definition that would be, as a purpose. When I think about an errand for the Lord. And I wonder what our errand is. And then this last verse, we actually have the seminary kids memorize this, or at least we used to. We did magnify our office to the Lord, taking responsibility, answering the sins in our own heads, laboring with our mind. I wonder what that looks like as we think about what our personal callings are. And what does it mean to magnify? Again, I jump over. I like to see a couple of the different definitions when we talk about magnifying. A couple of them maybe don't fit, but some of them I think would. As you think about magnifying and making something. One of the definitions that's over here is kind of stands out to me. It's called intensify. What does it mean to intensify our office? I have a calling in the church, and I'm laboring diligently. Maybe I give it some intensity. Maybe I give it some feeling as I serve to make that calling magnified. I don't think it always means making it bigger, but I think what the Lord expects and loves to have is our intensity and our efforts. So that's just one chapter. That's Jacob chapter 1. It's fun to go through these. Appreciate you willing to listen to my thoughts as I do so. Don't know if this is valuable. Don't know if it'll do it again, but I think I'll put it out there and move on to another chapter when we visit again. Thanks, and have a good day.